Good evening. My name is John H., and I'm an alcoholic. In this Code Blue Big Book Action Seminar, we're going to go through the recovery section of the Big Book line by line. We are going to take the action that our founders and the first 100 people who recovered say that we must do to overcome this seemingly hopeless condition of mind and body. Now, I don't claim to be any kind of a big book and 12-step guru or expert, not by any means. I am no kind of deep spiritual advisor. I'm just a simple drunk who was almost dead from the disease when a couple of recovered alcoholics reached out their hand to me and said, "We have a different way." Now, this is based on the Canadian method pioneered by the Golden Slippers, but I also borrow heavily from the Joe and Charlie Big Book Weekend tapes, from Chuck C., from Clancy, and from all of the giants upon whose shoulders we are riding. Now, I would love it if you could grab a couple of friends and listen to these sessions together, because working the steps with other people is always more powerful than trying to go through them alone. So you're going to need a large print big book, a highlighter, and a pen, and some willingness. And as you guys will see, we open every session with a set-aside prayer to more open our mind to be more receptive to this information. Thank you so much for listening. Good evening, everybody. I'm John. I'm an alcoholic. During the 1950s, a man by the name of Max C., now deceased, started a group in Winnipeg, Manitoba called the Golden Slippers. The group was a back to the basics of the big book kind of group, especially for those people who could not stay sober for any length of time. The group took a bunch of chronic slippers and walked them through the steps, taking the action exactly as laid out by the first 100 men and women who wrote the basic textbook Alcoholics Anonymous. This is not your typical thanks for sharing kind of AA meeting, nor is it like any seminar. Participants are asked to do all 12 steps as laid out in our basic textbook. One or more of the people who have done this work before will be guides to lead you through the instructions in our basic textbook using a dictionary published at about the same time as the book Alcoholics Anonymous to help us better understand the directions as they were written by the first 100 men and women. We ask every participant to commit to the entire process. Though we read and study the AA Big Book, this group is not limited to members of AA. We who have participated in these groups before have come to understand that these sessions make us much better sponsors. We can now lead people through the steps exactly as given to us by those who have gone before, unfettered and unchanged. In addition to being a boot camp for sponsors, we also feel this is especially valuable to those who have been through some sort of treatment or rehab and have been, in effect, left off at step 3 or 5. Recovery requires that we do all 12 steps. We recover in AA by taking the steps, and if we don't take the action as described in our basic textbook, we might not recover. The study and action sessions will guide you through the steps precisely as the first 100 men and women laid them down. These are back to the basic sessions, accepting the simple kit of spiritual tools that's been laid at our feet. Let's open with a set-aside prayer. God, please let me set aside everything I think I know about sobriety, life, and you, so that I may be open to a new experience. Amen. All right, welcome everybody. It looks like the weather's taken a little turn for the colder here. What we've done so far, the first session we looked at the history, a little bit of the history of AA and a history of the Big Book. The second session, what we did is we looked at the doctor's opinion. And that's what the problem is. Remember, I said that in all Bill's writings throughout the whole book, he's going to tell us what the problem is, he's going to tell us what the solution is, and then he's going to tell us the practical program of action that we need to do to implement that solution. So we got, in the doctor's opinion, we got the obsession of the mind and the allergy of the body. Right? So the allergy of the body is once we start taking a drink, once we put a drink into our body, we crave more. And we keep drinking. We can't control how much we take. We also have the obsession of the mind, which tells us, our brain tells us from time to time, it overcomes all ideas to the contrary and tells us that it's okay to take that first drink, or that maybe that we deserve that first drink, or maybe that we have to take that first drink for relief. Right? And then when we take that first drink, the allergy kicks in and we can't stop drinking. So basically he's saying that we're powerless over alcohol and that our lives have become unmanageable. Last week, they gave us the classic example of somebody who has the disease. So we looked at Bill Wilson, and we saw how he started out drinking. He used it as a solution for so he could talk to people, and then for loneliness, and how that progressed to heavier and heavier drinking until he crossed that line and he needed to drink just to feel normal, and then until he was drinking for oblivion. And then it showed us how he affected a recovery from that condition. So what we're going to do now in There Is a Solution is he's going to show us how we can get that power, or what we need to do to get that power to overcome our powerlessness. And in this chapter, by the way, it says there is a solution, right? A lot of people say, John, there's so many ways that you can recover. And the chapter heading says there's one. There is a solution. In this chapter, Bill is going to talk about two powers. He's going to talk about the power of the fellowship. That's when we get together sharing a common problem. And he's also going to talk about the power of the vital spiritual experience, right, or the spiritual awakening. And Bill is going to tell us that if we're able to use both of these powers together, right, not just the fellowship, not just meetings alone, and not just working the steps alone, but both of them, we might be able to overcome our alcoholism. It said in the forewords that people who came to AA and really tried, they did all 12 steps, that 75% were able to recover, which I think are pretty good odds. Again, my personal experience going through the book with people that have done all of the work, in my limited experience, albeit, is closer to 100%. So let us go to page 17. There is a solution. So at the top of the page, let's write, "This is not a me program," and let's put "me" in parentheses. This is not a me program. Chapter 2, there is a solution. There's that word again, we. Circle that word. We can do what I can't do, right? There's more power in numbers. We can do what I alone can't do. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Highlight the next four words. Nearly all have recovered. Okay, there's that word again, recovered. And I can't tell you the discussions that I've had, and it's always with these older guys, and they say, John, you cannot recover from this disease. And I said, when I came into these rooms, I was angry, I was fearful, I was physically ill, I couldn't stop drinking, and when I started, I couldn't control what I took. I was miserable, desperate, afraid, and I wanted to kill myself. And you're damn right that I've recovered from that condition. Of course I've recovered from that condition. I'm never saying that I'm cured from alcoholism. There are things that I've got to do on a daily basis, but I absolutely am a recovered alcoholic. I no longer am in that state of mind, right? They have solved, underline that word, solved the drink problem. We are average Americans. All sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. Underline the next sentence. We are people who normally would not mix. What a prophetic statement. Back then, they were all middle-aged white guys. And today, when you look around the AA room, we have people of all different races, creeds, educational background, ages, men and women. It's simply amazing what a prophetic statement that is. But there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful. We're going to highlight the next four lines. We are like the passengers of a great liner the moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. So what Bill is going to do is he's describing the he's letting us know about the fellowship by describing something that we already know. In the first half of the 20th century, the main mode of transportation between the continents was the great ocean liners. And there was, if you were over in Ireland and you had very little money and you wanted to book passage over to the United States, you would get a small berth in what's called the steerage section. That's in the very bowels of the ship. There's no fresh air. There's lousy food. There's no room. If you're lucky, you got a hammock to sleep in, and that's where the poorest of the poor came. If you had a little more money, you could go to 4th class. More money still, you'd go to 3rd class. More money yet, you'd go to 2nd class. And if you really had a lot of money, you'd go into 1st class. There you'd get your own big, huge stateroom for your family, plenty of fresh air, plenty of waiters, the best of the food, just great accommodations. But if you had the right kind of money, right, which is old money, if you had the right kind of religion and you were well connected, you would be asked to dine at the captain's table, which was the most elite part of the ship. Now, when these great liners were coming over, they didn't want the people in the steerage to even see the people who dined at the captain's table, so they even had separate stairwells so they wouldn't run into each other. And that's what he's talking about, people that have nothing in common here. Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy and escape from disaster does not subside as we go our individual ways. The feeling, underline, of having shared in a common peril is one element in this powerful cement which binds us. So underline that, and right next to it we're going to write recovery binds us together. Recovery binds us together. But that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. Now I'm going to be going kind of fast tonight because we got a lot of stuff to cover. So if you don't get all the notes, that's okay. You can get onto YouTube. You can type in Code Blue Big Book, and then you can catch up if you missed any of the notes. But we've got so much information tonight that I might be going a little faster than the fast way that I usually go.
Thank you.
So if you think about it, he's talking about the Titanic right there. And he's talking about somebody from the captain's table, and he's talking about somebody from the steerage section, and they both managed to get up to the top of the deck, and that Titanic was hit by the iceberg, and it's going down. So the one guy's in his tuxedo, he's got his nice shoes, his clothes, and the guy next to him has got on his work clothes, he's got the shoes with the holes in them, and they're looking at each other and like, my God, we got nothing in common here. But the second they jump overboard, they've got everything in common because they are trying to survive. They're trying to live, right? So when their butts hit that water, all of a sudden they're holding on to each other, they're helping each other. And when these guys get onto a lifeboat, they are hugging, they're laughing, they're dancing, they're singing, and it's just they're slapping each other on the back, and they've got the best feeling in the world when you've escaped a death with somebody else. But when these guys get to shore, they look at each other and they say, you know what, we've got nothing in common. They say goodbye and they never see each other again, right? But we here in Alcoholics Anonymous, right, when we escape from the common peril, it's also the greatest feeling in the world, and that's our fellowship. And again, where the recovery binds us together because alcohol is always right outside the door waiting to kill us, right? So we don't care who you are, we don't care where you come from, we don't care how much money you got, we don't care what level of education you have, we don't care what your ethnic background is, we don't care what your religion or politics are. The only thing that we care about is, are you an alcoholic? That's all that we care about here. Now he's going to give us a little bit of a warning here. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered, circle, a common solution. Circle that, a common solution. We, circle we, and again, that's the first 100 people who wrote the book. That's not people in Alcoholics Anonymous today. Those are the authors of this book. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree. Underline that. And next to it, we're going to write working the steps. Working the steps. And upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. Circle the word action. Okay, and then we're gonna highlight this last sentence. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. It's not the news of the fellowship, guys. It's the news of the spiritual awakening. It's the news of the psychic change. Brought about by the program of action. An illness of this sort, and we have come to believe it an illness, involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness. For with it there goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferers. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. So after list, we're going to write family disease, and then off to the left, we're going to write rock bottom. Okay, rock bottom. And we're going to have another, right above rock bottom, we're going to write ask sponsee, can you relate to this? Right? Because we're going to have a lot of those ask sponsees as we go through. And I want you to ask yourself this as well. But and also when we're in first step groups. When we're in first step groups too. Can you relate to this? You know, I came in here and I thought I'm the only one that I hurt, right? I hurt myself more than anybody. Well, that's not true. My parents, I killed my parents. I hurt my bosses, the people that I worked with. I let them down time and time again. My friends. I mean, this affected everybody in my life. And when I came in, I didn't understand that. But when I go through the work and I open my eyes and become spiritually aware, I can see how I've affected everybody, not just little old me. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or who may be affected. There are many. Highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. Strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. Okay, the squiggly writing, so that we got to highlight that. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with facts, so highlight but circle that word facts, about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. So we circled that little word facts, and off to the left, we're going to write fourth step column. Now, you may not know what that is, but we're going to find out. Because when we get to the fourth step, the facts that we're talking about, we're going to find them in the four-step column as we do our fourth step. So what they're telling us is we alcoholics are the only ones who can get through to this still sick and dying alcoholic, and that's on us. Right? The wives can't do it. The doctors can't do it. The boss can't do it. I mean, that's on us. But the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he is talking about, that his whole deportment means behavior and bearing, his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. So at the top of the page there, on the top of page 19, let's write actions first, and our minds follow. Right? So they're telling us in this book that we've got to do the work. We've got to take action. We've got to go to meetings. We've got to get a sponsor. We've got to work these steps. We've got to do that action first, and then our minds are going to follow. We are backwards people. Any other therapy in the world is going to say, change the way you think, and then you're going to change the way that you act. But not so with us. With us, we have to change our actions first, and then we're going to change the way that we think. Our minds are going to catch up with us. None of us makes a sole vocation. Vocation is job or career. None of us makes a sole vocation of this work, nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. Okay, so we're going to highlight the next 5 lines. We feel that the elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. So put a little 1 by but a beginning too. That's the first thing. So we got to quit drinking. That's the first thing, right? That goes without saying. And then put a 2 in front of A. That's the second thing we got to do. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. All of us spend much of our spare time in this sort of effort. You can stop highlighting there. And again, all of us, that's the first 100 people, right? And you can write off to the right, you can write first year and a half, Bill did this. That's all Bill did. And then somewhere, I have it off to the left. It's kind of hard to write in there. But let's write somewhere in there, practicing the principles at home and at work is the harder part. Practicing the principles at home and at work is the harder part. You know, I found that I was going to a meeting every day. I could be a really good guy for 1 hour a day, but I was still a raving lunatic at work, and I was still selfish, self-centered, treating people lousy. And I discovered we've got to practice these principles everywhere. So practicing the principles at home and at work is the harder part, right? Anybody can do it at the meeting. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated they can give nearly all their time to the work. That's where I was supposed to write first year and a half. Bill did this. If we keep on the way we are going, there is little doubt that much good will result. But the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. Those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflection that close by, hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. Many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. How then shall we present that which has been so freely given to us? So, you don't need to write this, but I mean, I was one of them. But I see people in these rooms who are dying. They're trying to use the fellowship only to stay sober. And you can just look at them and you can see their restless, irritable discontent. And they are fighting the obsession to drink one day at a time, and they're going to lose. And that was me. Right? So, and that's because nobody's telling them about the vital spiritual experience that's necessary to recover, right? So that we can have the peace of mind and the serenity and the happiness so that we don't want to take that drink. We have concluded to publish this anonymous volume. An anonymous volume. Might seem silly, but that's this book. An anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to task our combined experience and knowledge. This should suggest a useful program for anyone concerned with a drinking problem. So this is very important where it says we shall bring to task. Again, write first 100, and you can write first 100 had to agree before writing it down. And I'll talk about that a little bit later too. But Bill would submit pages to the group in Akron and the group in New York, and towards the end, towards a group in Cleveland, and they all had to agree that it was good before they sent it off to the publisher. So the first 100 had to agree before writing it down. So again, you know, this is the combined experience of 100 people. This book is not written by one person. Highlight the next sentence. Of necessity, there will have to be discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. So highlight that, and then next to it write, we are not doctors. We are not doctors. And then you can write 4 balances of well-being. That's the medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. We are not doctors. 4 balances of well-being. And again, if you can't get the notes taken fast enough, just keep up with me and go back and listen to it. We are aware that these matters are, from their very nature, controversial. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which contained no basis for contention or argument. We shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal. Okay, highlight to the end of the page. Most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and a respect for their opinions are attitudes. Hold on. So shortcomings, draw a little arrow down and you can write defects of character. Bill likes to use a lot of different words to mean the same thing. We're also going to write something else at the bottom of the page. My sponsor, because he sent me out to sponsor other people before I thought I was ready, but he knew better. He said, he had me write down, if they don't ask your advice, don't give it. So I'm talking about people in first step groups, and I'm talking about a brand new sponsee. At least at the beginning. If they don't ask your advice, don't give it. If we start coming down from a high mountain and telling people what they have to do, we alcoholics are probably going to rebel. So what we can do is we can show them what we did. Now, and my sponsor did this with me for about a week, right? But then when we formed a relationship, then he did start becoming a little bit more forceful on things that I should be doing. But at the beginning, he might have scared me off, and we might scare others off if we start telling them what to do. Attitudes which make us more useful to others. Okay, so let's highlight this next sentence. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant, okay, next to constant, right, not occasional, our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. Our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend on our constant thought of others and how we may help their needs. So one other thing, and you don't have to write this, but my sponsor had me write tall order for a selfish prick next to that sentence. Right? Constant thought of others? Really? You got to be kidding me. You may already have asked yourself why it is that all of us became so very ill from drinking. Doubtless you are curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, underline, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. There it is again. We have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking, underline these 5-6 words, what do I have to do? Underline that. So we've got another Ask Sponsee. Off to the left, you can write Ask Sponsee here. Do you want to stop drinking? Right? These are a lot of things we have to find out if the people we're helping are serious. So ask sponsee, do you want to stop drinking? And hopefully they're going to say, yeah, more than anything, but I can't. I've tried everything and I can't. Right? Well, the very next sentence, it is the purpose of this book, underline, to answer such questions specifically, we shall tell you what we have done. So underline that. And by the word, what we have done, right, not thought. What we have done. Because it's actions first. We're not going to tell people what we're thinking. What are we doing? So ask sponsee right in there, do you want to stop drinking? If they're not sure, then we've got to think about whether we might be better spending our time with somebody who absolutely wants to stop drinking and cannot, right? Before going into a detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we see them. Now, these next statements are going to refer to people who don't get it, people who are not alcoholics. How many times people have said to us, I can take it or leave it alone, why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fella can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine, lay off the hard stuff? His willpower must be weak, he could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl, I should think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him that if he ever drank again, it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again. So next to those statements, we're going to write, doesn't work for us, doesn't work for us, and then people who don't understand alcoholism. People who don't understand alcoholism. It's funny, man. There's a guy at work, and he was promoted and went to another store, and through his drinking, he got demoted. He almost died. And he comes back, and my boss thinks that if he thinks he can help this guy, and I'm going to give him another chance. He's going to be assistant manager. And this, what happens is this guy has the obsession of the mind and the allergy, so time after time, he misses whole days of work. And my boss is just like a hopeful wife. He keeps giving him chance after chance after chance. And I tried to explain to him, I said, look, until he does the work and works the steps in Alcoholics Anonymous, this is going to continue to happen. And it just happened again last Sunday. And I try to get it through, but my boss doesn't understand. He thinks, no, if I yell at him hard enough and tell him that this is the last chance, he's going to quit. And I'm like, okay, give it a shot. Now, these are commonplace observations on drinkers which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. Okay, highlight to the end of the paragraph. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. So you can write after hours, you can write, non-alcoholics don't get it. Non-alcoholics don't get it. They think we ought to be able to stop. It's your last chance, right? So now we're going to talk about the three types of drinkers. So let's highlight the word moderate drinker and write type 1 next to that. Type 1. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have good reason for it. Highlight, they can take it or leave it alone. Okay, now draw a line under can take it or leave it alone, and underneath it write type 2. Okay, so remember the moderate drinker, that's the person that has a couple of drinks, they get a slightly tipsy, out of control feeling, and they stop. They don't like that feeling. If they drink any more, they're going to throw up or they'll get dizzy. They do not like that feeling at all. They can have half a wine cooler and stop. Okay, so under the line write type 2. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. Highlight the word hard drinker, and at the bottom of the page you can write or heavy drinker. Okay, we have a certain type of hard drinker, bottom of the page, or heavy drinker. He may have the habit badly enough, and of course remember when the book was written, he or she may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. This guy's got it easy. He's only gonna chop 5 years off his life. Highlight the next 5 words. If a sufficiently strong reason, just that, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor. Okay, now highlight again to moderate becomes operative. This man can also stop or moderate. Okay, so although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention. So we've seen these guys all over the place, right? The hard drinker, they don't have the obsession or the allergy like us, but they do drink like us. But if they get a really good reason to stop, they're going to stop. And these guys are all the time. They say, John Henry, when I was in the service, I was an alcoholic too. I drank with you guys. I got thrown in the brig, all of that stuff. But when I got out of the service, I got married, I had children, I went to church, and I quit drinking. Why can't you do it? Right? Well, no, these guys are not alcoholics. They don't have the obsession. They do not have the allergy. So they are able. Some of them might need to be detoxed, but they don't have a problem. And some of them can even moderate. So some of them can drink normally after this. Okay, so draw a line under that, under medical attention, and write type 3. Okay, but what about the real alcoholic? Highlight real alcoholic. This is type 3. That's most of us. He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. Highlight the next 3 lines. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Now, some of us, the first time we drank, like me, the first time I ever drank, I kept going back for more and I blacked out. The allergy kicked in right off the bat. Some of us can drink safely for years, but then something happens and we cross that invisible line and we drink ourselves into alcoholism where the obsession and the allergy takes over and we can no longer control it. And what difference does it make? When we come into these rooms, we're all alcoholics. I don't care if you were one from the get-go or you drank yourself into it. We all have the same problem. Here is the fellow who has been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. Underline the next sentence. He is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So next to that, we're going to write Robert Louis Stevenson, right? Or RLS if you do crosswords like me. Robert Louis Stevenson, 1819 is when he wrote it. And you can write, he was alcoholic. He was alcoholic. So we all know the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So, I think that Robert Louis Stevenson was putting on an autobiographical tale when he wrote that book. Because once he started drinking, he's like the rest of us. He couldn't control it, and he went out and did crazy things. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. Now, I want all of you to think if any of these things, and you don't have to, all of these don't have to relate to you, but see if even one or two or a few more than that relate to you. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature, but little. I turned into a different person. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day and he frequently becomes disgustingly, even dangerously antisocial. Underline the next sentence. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. Okay, so also right next to all of these, we're going to write, can you relate to any of these descriptions? And you might be asking people in first step meetings, you might be asking your sponsee, can you relate to any of these descriptions? Right? And I mean, as far as getting drunk at the wrong time, I mean, I Saturday morning meeting, John, if you show up drunk one more time, you're fired, and I didn't drink all week, but I was so nervous on Friday night, I had to have a couple of drinks, and sure enough, I showed up drunk that Saturday and got fired. Right? That's what we do. He is often perfectly sensible and well-balanced concerning everything except liquor. But in that respect, he is incredibly, underline these three words, dishonest and selfish. Dishonest and selfish. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. I think only an alcoholic would say that about himself, possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes. And funny enough, I think most of us do. He is the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around. Yet early the next morning he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. So again, next to the rest of the whole paragraph, right, can you identify? And I want you guys to think if you can identify, but you're also going to be asking people that you sponsor when you're taking them through the book, can you identify with any of this stuff? I mean, I know me, it started when I was a young teenager. I mean, I would have my pot and my booze hid all over the place in case my mom would find it. In college, when I lived with other people, I had to hide it so nobody else could find it. And I needed to have it in many different places, right? As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. Then comes the day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Highlight the last sentence. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and treatment centers. It's actually hospitals and sanitariums, but after sanitariums, write the word treatment. Right? That was my big escape. I went through 9 of them, man. When the world was crashing about me, little Johnny would escape to a 30-day treatment program to try to put things back together, right? This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary. But this description should identify him roughly. Okay, so let's highlight the next 5 lines. Why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? Stop highlighting there. And off to the left, we're going to write obsession of the mind. Obsession of the mind. And we don't really know. All we know for sure is that from time to time, an idea that overcomes all ideas to the contrary, that we should take that drink, wins out. We don't know why it does, but we know that it happens. What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Perhaps there will never be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We are not sure why, once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. Underline, we cannot answer the riddle. They don't know. We cannot answer the riddle. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We are equally positive, underlined to the end of the page, that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. So next to that, we're going to write allergic reaction. We studied that. We talked about that in the doctor's opinion 2 weeks ago. Now at the bottom of the page, we're going to write rum cake. We're going to write NyQuil. We're going to write pills from dentist. We're going to write near beer. Right? Near beer has alcohol in it. I mean, all of these things, if we get a little bit of alcohol into our body, we are flirting with death. Right? I mean, and I said this before, NyQuil comes with its own shot glass. I had a really bad cold and I relapsed on NyQuil and I wasn't feeling good enough, so I went back and bought 3 more. Then I just went to the liquor store. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. At the top of page 23, you write, worry about the first drink. That's the only one we got to worry about. Worry about the first drink. And for me, when it says we react much like other men sanely, I would do that if my world fell on top of my head. I could do that for about 3 months. But then that restlessness, that irritability, and that discontentedness would start to take over, and I would turn into a dry drunk and nobody wanted to be around me. So for me, it was 3 months I would react like a normal person, but then I would go crazy again without my liquor. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Okay, so we're going to double underline this next sentence. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. Okay, so, I was about 4.5 years old. And I think I grabbed about a 10-pound little weight from my brother's weight set. And I was running around the basement going, look at me, look at me. And I dropped that sucker and it landed on the bridge of my foot and snapped it in 2. And that sucker hurt me worse than I'd ever been hurt up to that point in my life, right? And from that day to this day, I have never had a strange obsession to drop a heavy weight on my foot. But alcohol has broken me over and over and over and over, right? That's the obsession of the mind. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are that he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. So next to that, what I just read, the philosophy of the man, right, explains mental obsession. Explains mental obsession. Pretty much that whole paragraph. He will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. Now the funny thing, guys, when we stop drinking, and you don't need to write this, but we are always stone cold sober when we take that first drink, right? Or some of us like to say we're stark raving sober, right? But we pick that up. The allergy hasn't kicked in yet. That's the obsession of our mind. So let's highlight that first sentence. I love it. Once in a while, he may tell the truth. Just once in a while. And the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have, right? Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time. Okay, we're going to highlight to the end of the paragraph. But in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady, you can underline malady too, has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday they will beat the game. Next to that line, we're going to write insanity of the disease, but they often suspect they are down for the count. So next to there is the obsession that somehow, someday they will beat the game. Write insanity of the disease. Right? I've been sober for 6 months. God, you know what, man? I'm beginning to think this whole thing was a mistake. Maybe I'm not even, I don't think an alcoholic could go 6 months without drinking. Maybe I'm not even an alcoholic. I bet that I can just have 5 beers, no more, right? I'm pretty sure that I can do that, right? And then I start drinking and I can't stop. But they often suspect they are down for the count. How true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal. But everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy. You can underline that and write morbid drowsiness. Will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will. Right? That's like my boss. He's saying, there's no way this guy is going to relapse and miss another day at work. Not after the last tongue lashing I gave him. He'll never do it again. And I just laugh and I say, you just wait. We're going to highlight the next 2 lines. The tragic truth is that if the man be alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. So next to that, we're going to write crossing the invisible line. Crossing the invisible line. The tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost, keep highlighting, he has lost control. Keep highlighting that, and then highlight the next 3 lines. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. Okay, so we're going to write something at the top of the page, and I'll kind of explain it. Let's write, my own memory does not keep me sober. Why would your war stories? Okay, my own memory. I just got out of jail last week. My own memory does not keep me sober. Why would your war stories?